This conference will now be recorded.
Hi there, everyone. This is Hannah at the Blue Hill Library, and I'm just going to take you through my presentation on getting started with Gmail. This is going to be a basic guide to setting up a Google account and getting going using the basic features of Gmail. So the broad topics on our agenda for today are going to be what is Gmail and what is Google, a little bit about Google's data collection and privacy practices, some step-by-step instructions for how to sign up for a Google account and Gmail address, the very basics of using Gmail and what their interface looks like, and then a little bit of a dive into your preferences and settings, different ways that you can customize your account. So to start off with the broad question of what is Gmail, what is Google, we'll discuss the Google family of products, look at Gmail in a nutshell, and then talk a little bit about webmail versus using an email client. So the Google family of products, as I call it, Gmail is an email service from Google, and you may have heard of Google from some of their other products. Most famously, their search engine, google.com. That was their first kind of flagship product, and it's still what they're most known for. It's the sort of synonymous word for searching, Google it. But they also make many, many other products that they have created since they started Google, the search engine. Google Chrome is a web browser, so it's a piece of software that you can download for free to use to navigate the internet. YouTube, the video website, is owned by Google. Google makes Android, the operating system for some phones and tablets. Google Maps, which is a popular service for finding directions to different places all over the world. Google Classroom has become really popular right now because it's helping a lot of teachers and students stay connected while they're doing the remote learning. And tons of other products. This is really just a small sliver of some of the most recognizable products from Google, but they make a lot of different things and they're all connected. So to focus in on Gmail, Gmail is Google's web-based email service. Anyone can create a free account, and that also provides access to all of Google's other products. So once you have a Gmail address, you have a Google account, which is going to be, what you're using when you're looking at YouTube videos and Google Maps and Google Translate and all of their other products. And using Gmail, you can send and receive email messages through any web browser from anywhere with an internet connection. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what using webmail means versus using an email client. So what do we mean by this? There are two ways that you can access the same emails. Webmail is when you go through a website on an internet browser. So most email services are available through webmail, Gmail, Yahoo Mail, Hotmail. These are all services that you can use by going to a website, for example, gmail.com, on any web browser you want. So you could use Firefox, you could use Safari, whatever web browser you usually use to access the internet. And you would check your email right there online. Email clients are software programs that you have installed on your computer or device. So for example, Outlook, Apple Mail, there's a mail app on Windows as well. And these software programs are set up to download your email from whatever service you get it from. So you might have a Gmail account. You could go check your webmail through gmail.com using an internet browser. Or you could set up, for example, Outlook or Apple Mail or any other independent email client that you have installed on your computer and set it up to download your Gmail emails and show up in that program as well. So there's kind of two different ways that you can access the same emails. You can use either option, but this presentation is going to focus on Gmail's webmail interface. So the first option where you actually go to their website to check your email. Just to dive in a little more on that distinction, so webmail is accessible from anywhere with an internet connection, and the messages don't take up space on your computer. So these are all stored on someone else's computer somewhere else in the world, on Gmail servers or MSN servers, whatever email service you use, and you just access them through the internet. So they're not taking up any memory on your actual hard drive on your computer. And it's kind of nice that you can access them from anywhere that has the internet. If you, for example, need to use a public computer at a library or hop on someone's computer at a friend's house, you're always going to be able to log into that website and see your same emails. And these are just some screenshots showing examples of what some webmail interfaces look like. The top one shows Gmail, and the one on the bottom is Hotmail. They're pretty similar in terms of layout. And then email clients, with these programs, the messages are saved directly on your computer or device. So they do take up some space. If space is a big issue for you on your computer, you might want to consider shifting to webmail. One thing to keep in mind is that once you've set up your email client to talk to your email service, you're going to have to kind of disconnect them before you delete the emails from your computer. Because once they're set up, they're going to be synced. So any changes you make in one place are going to be reflected in the other. So if you don't want to permanently lose access to your emails, you just don't want copies of them saved on your computer, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to disconnect those services first. And again, these are just some screenshots of different email clients. I believe the top one is Apple Mail, and then either Windows Mail or Outlook. I think this one's Outlook on the bottom. And so you can see they look a little bit, there's some more panes and more options. Personally, I find them a little bit clunky. I prefer using webmail, but it definitely ends up being mostly a personal preference thing, especially if space isn't a huge issue for you. You can use either one. Just as I said, we're going to focus on some of the features and layout of Gmail's web interface today. And just a quick note on web browsers, since we are talking about webmail. You can use any web browser to access Gmail's webmail. This is a common misconception that I hear. People think that because Google Chrome, which is that second one on the list here, is owned by Google, that you need to use Chrome in order to access Gmail, since that's also a Google product, but that's not true. I like to think of web browsers as different types of cars. You can get in any car to drive to the same location, which would be your Gmail. So whichever one you have a preference for, whichever one you normally use, is okay to use to access Gmail. So I'm going to talk next for a little bit about Google's data collection and privacy practices. I think this is a really important topic to think about before you sign up for a Gmail or a Google account. We're going to cover what information Google collects about you, why they collect your data, and a little bit on how you can control your privacy. So what information does Google collect? Google partners with a lot of different websites to store information about your interests, your demographics, your habits, and it does this even if you don't have a Google account. So you don't necessarily have to be logged into anything to do a search on Google's search engine or to watch a YouTube video, but they are tracking you when you're doing that and trying to sort of build that profile on you, even if you don't have an account formally set up. Having an account does allow you to set some privacy preferences. So in some ways, it's advantageous if you're already using the product to be able to have an account and change some of your preferences. So continuing about what information Google collects on you. They collect information that you provide, such as personal information when you set up your account. It'll ask you for things like your name, your date of birth. They also collect information through content you create and receive on their services. So that could be emails that you are sending and receiving through Gmail. It could be Google Docs that you're creating and sharing on that service. They also collect information that you don't necessarily provide but that you sort of create as you use their services. So they'll collect information about the apps, browsers, and devices that you're using. For example, they might know that you're accessing Gmail through a Safari web browser on a Mac computer running such and such operating system, or that you're using the Gmail app on an Android phone, information like that. They'll also collect information about your activity while using Google's services, which is a very broad category, especially when you consider how we talked about all of the different products that they create. So, using their services can really encompass a lot, and your activity can really be quite a lot. So, what YouTube videos you're watching, what locations you're looking up on Google Maps, things like that. And your location information is the last thing on that slide. So they will keep track of where you are. If you're on a laptop, this might be through your IP address, sort of where your internet connection is coming from. If you're on a mobile device, it could be much more granular, so your actual GPS coordinates as you move about. And then a few words about why Google collects all this data. These are quotes from Google's website, so I'm going to give them a fair chance to explain themselves before I get into it. Just to be extra transparent, I tend to skew a little bit more on the tinfoil hat side of the spectrum in terms of privacy issues. So I tend not to take everything that Google says at face value, but this is their explanation for why they collect your data. Data makes Google services more helpful and relevant, but how we use this information is an individual choice that belongs to you. We keep you informed about what data we collect, how it's used, and why, and we build powerful data controls into your Google account so you can choose the privacy settings that are right for you. They also say when you use Google services, you trust us with your data. It's our responsibility to be transparent about the data we collect and how we use it in making our services work better for you. So that's definitely part of the story. I think some of these things are definitely true. I think their use of data has made some of their services better and more helpful, and relevant is something they like to cite a lot. Both in the sense of, okay, if they know that lots of people are using a particular web browser, then they want to make sure that the services are working really well on that web browser that maybe people weren't using before. But also in the sense of, personalizing recommendations to you, personalizing your YouTube video suggestions, personalizing your search results based on your location, so that if you're looking for a restaurant or cafe, it will pull up the ones that are actually close to you, maybe more helpful to know about. So that's sort of their company line. A little bit more information. So Google uses your data to develop and customize their services and to sell advertising, which they do admit in some of their materials, but it's certainly not their highlight. Advertising is really the hidden cost of seemingly free online services like Gmail and like lots and lots of other services on the internet. Advertising is kind of the basis of the internet economy. And it's a little bit different from advertising in traditional media because of ad tracking, which allows companies like Google to build a profile on you based on your habits and personal data, and then sell targeted advertisements to fund their operations. So whereas in traditional media, you sort of had to guess what audience might be most receptive to a particular advertisement, you might guess, okay, we're going to put our ad for this cooking gadget on TV during this cooking show because that's likely going to find a good audience. You don't have to guess like that on the internet, because you can, as an advertiser, target your ads to folks who you have a lot of data to support that they will be very receptive to that advertisement. So if I go to a cooking site and you go to a cooking site and there's ads on the side, we might be seeing completely different ads, even though we're looking at the same content, because we have different habits, and companies like Google have tracked those habits and monetized them by selling advertisements. This is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a matter of opinion. Some people really like having targeted ads because they are more relevant. But personally, I find them a little invasive and creepy. And I don't love that this is the way that the economy of the internet has been created. Because even if you don't have any reason why you can't be tracked through everything you do, some people do have very good reasons why they need to protect their privacy. And so when the status quo is being tracked all the time, I think that endangers freedom generally. So how can you control your privacy? Now that I've gotten everyone panicked. Once you create a Google account, you can turn off ad personalization, and you can limit some information, some data gathering, and what information is public. So I say some with italics because I don't have the most faith that that information is not being collected and stored somewhere, even if you turn off some of the settings. Google has in the past, been sued and is, I believe, currently in a lawsuit in the European courts where data privacy practices are a little stricter when they have said they're not going to do something and then it turns out that they're still secretly doing it. So, I think it's a good idea to, if you're concerned about your privacy, do what you can, but I don't want anyone to be under any illusions that you have complete control necessarily of anywhere that this information is going to be stored. Another thing you can do, which we're not going to cover in this presentation, but maybe something to think about generally, is you can use an ad blocker on your web browser. So there's a good one from the Electronic Frontier Foundation called Privacy Badger, and that will help block trackers, including trackers by Google's ads. So that's another option if you're concerned about privacy. And we'll dig into more about how to actually adjust those settings a little bit later in the presentation. So for now, if you have gotten through that whole lecture from me about privacy and you still want to sign up for a Google account, which to be fair, I use personally, I'm going to go through some steps for how to create your account. So you can start by going to gmail.com. Again, you can use any web browser for that, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, whichever you usually use. And there is a piece of text, a button near the bottom of the login screen that says Create Account. You can click on that to start making your Google account. It's going to ask you for your personal information, so enter your name and then choose a username, and this will be your email address at gmail.com. So if you want it to be your name with a period between your first and last name, you can put that in. But just keep in mind, whatever your username is going to be that first part of your email address. And then set a password and make sure it's secure and not something that you use for every other platform. The next screen will give you an opportunity to enter a recovery phone number or email address. This will help get you back into your account if you forget your password. And I would strongly recommend that you do this if you can. Gmail is a little bit notorious about being difficult to sign back into if you've forgotten your password. It's possible, but they make you jump through a lot of hoops and it can be pretty confusing. If you have a phone number or an email address from some other email associated with your Google account, it can be a lot easier to get back in. And the screen will also ask you to enter your date of birth and your gender information. Then you will see a screen with Google's terms of use and privacy policy. You can scroll through that if you want to read more specifically what information Google collects from your account. And you will have to agree to the terms of use and privacy policy in order to create your account. We'll go through those privacy preferences later, as I said. Okay. So once you've done that, you're in. You have created a Gmail account. Congratulations. And when you log in, the first thing you'll see is your inbox here. So as you can see, your emails will display in the center of the screen. The newest emails will be at the top of the list. And then the other important piece is this left-hand sidebar. It shows your different mailboxes. So inbox is going to be the primary one where your messages automatically go when you receive them. There's also things like your sent mail, drafts, where Google will save emails that you started but didn't finish. And then there's a little option for more, which if you click on, it'll bring up some more options, including your spam, trash, and other folders like that. So you can scroll through that left-hand sidebar to see those. And if you ever want to hide the sidebar, there's 3 lines in the upper left corner that you can click on, and that will minimize it down to just a few little icons on the side. I tend to keep mine expanded out. I like to see all those options all the time. But if you prefer to have more room on the screen just for the inbox, then you can hide that and just click on those 3 lines again if you want to expand it out. When you want to send an email, you start by clicking the Compose button, which is at the top of that left-hand sidebar. And when you do that, a blank email will appear near the bottom right for you to fill out. Now, I kind of recommend adding a subject line first, skipping the recipient's line, and then starting with subject, and then clicking in the big empty box to type your actual message, and then going back and adding the recipient's right before you send. Part of why I recommend this is just that I tend to be the kind of person who will sometimes accidentally send an email before I'm really done with it. But if you don't have any recipients listed, then it can't send. So that's one way. If that's something that you've struggled with before, that's a way you can avoid that. So add recipients, the email addresses you want to send it to. You can add multiple folks to one message if you want. And then you can click send, the blue button, when you're done. And that little arrow next to the word send, the little sort of drop down menu arrow, if you click on that, it will give you the option also to schedule it to send at a later date. So, if you're up late writing an email and you don't want someone who's going to get it to know that you were up so late, you can schedule it to send the next morning at 8 a.m. and pretend you're a really responsible adult. If you don't want to send it right away, that can be a good option. That's a relatively new feature. The subject line, whatever you type in that subject line, will show up along that black bar at the top of the email. And Google will save everything as you type. So you don't have to worry about saving the email if you want to leave and come back to it later. Anytime you make a change, it'll automatically save it in your drafts folder as long as you're still connected to the internet. And part of what that means is that if you decide you don't want to keep this email, clicking the X at the upper right of the email will not actually delete it. That will just close out the screen where you're editing it. If you want to delete it, you want to go straight down from that X all the way to the bottom right and click the little trash can icon. Then those icons along the bottom of the email are other ways that you can kind of enhance your email. The little A with the underline right next to the send button will open up a menu of text editing options. So if you'd like to bold certain words in your email or change the font color or size, you can do that using those tools. The paperclip icon next to that will allow you to attach a file. So if you click that, it will open a little window where you can attach a file from somewhere on your computer. And Gmail is also really user-friendly with dragging and dropping files to attach. So if that's easier for you, you can just find the file and drag it over and let it go anywhere on that body of the email where you've typed out your message. The next one over, the little link icon, will allow you to hyperlink text in your email message. And you don't necessarily need to do that. If you want to send someone a link, you can just paste in the full web address and it will automatically be a clickable link when the person receives it, if you've got that whole email ad or the whole web address in there. But sometimes it's nice if you want to, especially if it's a big long link, you can just change some of the text of your actual message into a clickable link. So if you want to say, here is that article I was telling you about, and just have the word here be something you can click on that will take you to the article, you could highlight the word here, click that link button, and then paste in the URL or the web address there. And that will allow that to make it a clickable link, and you won't have to have that whole big long text. Those are the only buttons I'm going to go over for now in the Compose screen. There's lots of other features there you can explore and check out, but those are going to be the major ones that you would use most often. So reading and responding to emails, back to that inbox view. To read an email, you can click anywhere along that subject line, pretty much anywhere on that horizontal bar where the email is. You can click on that and it will open the email up. One thing to keep in mind is that Google threads emails together that have the same subject. So some people find this really disorienting if they're used to getting separate emails for every single reply and message they get in their inbox. By default, Google will put those all together in what it calls a conversation view and keep them all sort of together in a thread. So you can change that in your preferences if you don't like it. I find it really convenient and helps keep me organized, but everybody's got a different preference. So you can see this is a conversation with several messages between several people. The ones that have already been received and read in the past will be sort of gray and collapsed down, so you just see that first line of them. You can click on any one of those to expand them out and see the whole message. And then anything that's new or the most recent message will be at the bottom, and you'll be able to see the whole thing. When you're ready to reply to a message, there's a couple different places that have this arrow icon. The one off to the side of a given message will reply, to that particular message. The one at the bottom will reply to the most recent message. There's not a huge difference between them, but if you want to sort of go back and reply to an older message in the thread without including the newer one in the little summary that's going to be at the bottom of the email, then you can click on the side one. And just to quickly cover the difference between reply and reply all. Reply will send your response only to the most recent person who had sent you the email. Reply all would send it to everyone on the list. And then forwarding is a way that you can send a message on to someone who was not originally included in it, especially if you want to include attachments. So when you click one of those little arrows, a box at the bottom will appear that looks very similar to that compose box. It's got all those same buttons. You just type in your reply and then you click send to send it off. And just to quickly go through contacts, Google will automatically remember any email addresses that you've corresponded with before. So I don't use the contacts feature very often because it tends to just save everything for me. But you can add or edit contacts yourself. If you click the little square of squares in the upper right corner of the screen, that'll open up all of Google's different services. And if you look for one called contacts, you can click on that in order to make some changes. If you want to edit existing contacts, you just hover over their name and then a little pencil icon will appear. And you click on that and you can change any information you want saved in that record. You can also create a brand new contact. There's this create contact button at the top of the left-hand sidebar, very similar to the compose button when you're looking at the inbox screen. If you click on that, it will open a new little window for you to enter in their details. And one thing we're not going to go over too in depth, but that is a nice feature if you're just getting started with Gmail and you have used a different email service in the past, you can import contacts from a different account. So again, on that left-hand sidebar in the contacts module, you can click where it says import, and that will take you through the steps where you can just port in all of the email addresses that you had in your contacts at your other email service. So that's the basics of Gmail and how it functions. And I'm just going to talk a little bit more about preferences and settings that you can change. We're going to talk about your general settings for Gmail, a few specific inbox settings, and then circle back to those Google account settings where you can change some of your privacy preferences. So your settings are really powerful in Gmail. One nice thing for folks who are new to the service is that you can adjust almost anything about the way it looks and functions through your settings. So if there's something that you are having trouble getting used to that's different from your old email that you don't like, it's likely that there's a way that you can adjust it and make it more like what you want. To access your settings, you click the gear icon near the upper right of the screen when you're in your inbox, and then you select settings. When you go to your settings, you will see there's a lot of different options. I'm not going to go through every one here, but I thought I would translate some of the ideas in those settings into some sort of plain language questions for you to think about. So these are some things that you can adjust in your settings. And if you have trouble, once you've thought about these questions, translating them back into which setting to change, then get in touch with me and I can help you. So things that you can change. How many messages do you want on a page? It defaults to 50, but if you'd like to see more, you could change it so that you scroll down farther before you have to tab over to the next page. What font size and style do you want for emails that you compose? So we talked a little bit about how you can change, font by clicking that A with the underline when you're in the compose window. That would be for a change to a specific email. But if you wanted your email to always be blue or always be in a particular font, you can change the default in your settings so that it'll start out that way without you having to make changes every time. Do you want smart features, quote unquote smart features like autocorrect? So I turn all of these off because I find them really annoying personally. Google has lots of ways that it's trying to help you by suggesting replies, trying to predict what you're going to say as you type, auto-correcting your spelling. And I've turned all of those off just because I prefer to sort of write my own emails and not have a computer write them for me. But they can be really helpful, especially if you're someone that is not that comfortable typing. It might be much easier to click on a suggested reply of "sounds great, see you then," as opposed to typing all of that out. So those are on by default, but if they annoy you, you can turn them off. Also on by default are reminders, which they call nudges, when you haven't responded to an email for a while. Again, I've turned that off because I don't like being harassed by my own email service, but it can be really helpful if you're the kind of person who likes getting reminders. And that's a nice way to keep your mind on different emails that Google's artificial intelligence has determined that you might want to respond to. Do you like having emails threaded together like we talked about, or do you want each one to show up as a separate line in your inbox? That's that conversation view, which you can turn off if you'd prefer to have a more traditional separate line for each reply. Would you prefer to see text instead of icons for buttons in your inbox? So when you select a message in Gmail, a bunch of buttons will appear, giving you options to delete it, archive it, mark it as spam, several other things that I'll be getting into in more detail in my next workshop. And those icons can be a bit tricky to learn what they mean. You can hover your mouse over them to have a text translation, but you can also, in your Gmail settings, just change the output to be that text instead of the icons. So that might be a nice thing if you're just getting started with Gmail and you're not sure what any of those tiny pictures mean yet. And you can add a signature to your email. So do you want to have your name show up at the bottom of every email you send automatically? Or, for example, at the library, I have my name, title, and the library's website and phone number. That kind of information can be helpful if you want to have a signature. So those are just some of the many things that you can change in your settings when you first open up those Gmail settings. You can see there's a lot of different sort of options here. We were looking in the general options before to ask all those questions. The only other one I'm going to touch on today is this inbox section of your settings. So if you click where it says inbox, you'll see some more settings. And this is just where you can change a few more things directly about the way your inbox is laid out. This inbox type option will allow you to change the order that mail appears in your inbox. So the default view, as we said, is just chronological order with the newest on top. But you can also make it so that unread is on top, or things that you have starred or that Gmail has marked as important are on top. So there's a few different ways you could set up your inbox there. The categories checkboxes here, you may have noticed when you're in your inbox that The messages that you're looking at by default are in this primary tab across the top, but there's also one that says social and one that says promotions. And Google's going to automatically try to sort of filter email into those three buckets. So social would be, for example, if you're signed up for email notifications from Facebook, it's going to try to route those into your social folder. Promotions might be coupons or newsletters that you're receiving from other organizations, whereas primary would be more like actual email that real human beings are sending you. So that can be a useful way to have your email broken out. But if you don't like that, you can just uncheck social and promotions, and then you'll only have that primary tab in your inbox. If you like social and promotions being there and you want even more kind of filtering, you could add updates or forums. So those are just additional categories of ways that Google can try to automatically sort your email into these different buckets. And then also on this page below where the screenshot ends, there is an option to show or hide the important markers that Gmail comes up with. So again, as you use the service, Gmail is scanning through your emails, monitoring your habits, and they're going to sort of designate what they think might be an important email. So that could be really helpful for you to have that additional little flag on them. Personally, I have turned it off because, again, I don't really like Gmail, having that excuse to track what I'm doing. So you can turn off, you can both hide the markers themselves and you can turn off Gmail's function of trying to sort them as important or not important if you want. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to go back to those Google account settings. So these are those broader settings that are going to be applicable across all the different Google products you might use, not just Gmail, but YouTube, your calendar, Google Drive, any of those other services. So just like when we went to contacts, if you go to that square of squares in the upper right corner and open up the list of all those different Google products, there should be one option under there that says account. It may have a picture of you if you've uploaded one, or just your initials if you haven't. If you click on that, it will take you to a place with lots of options that you can change. So you can definitely get lost in your account settings because there's so many of them, but a few to focus on just to start. There's a left-hand sidebar, one option of which is data and personalization. So there's a few options there that I recommend looking into. The privacy checkup will walk you just through the basic privacy settings, give you a good start. And then activity controls is another option under that data and personalization section. That's where you can turn off things like web and app activity, location history, YouTube history. So if you want to stop some of that tracking, at least as much as you can turn off some of those features. And, privacy and convenience are always sort of a trade-off on the internet. So you can make your own decision about what you want to keep on and off. Sometimes, having your YouTube history can be really helpful if you're thinking, what was that great YouTube video I watched last week, and you don't want to have to search for it all over again. You can look in your history and find it. But at the same time, saving that history is allowing Google to sort of use that information about you to continue to build that profile on you. And I should have mentioned earlier, the profile that they're using to sell advertisements is anonymous. They're not saying, sell your ad to Hannah, she does XYZ. They're just saying, we have a 30-year-old female with interests in these categories based on her browsing habits. So it's not like they're selling your data associated with your name, but they are using that profile that they have built on you, anonymized, but based on all of your activity. And then also under this data and personalization section, you can go to add personalization, and that's where you can turn off that personalized advertising if you don't like it. Also under these account settings on that left-hand sidebar, there's a security section, and I recommend looking at that as well. Security checkup, similar to privacy checkup, will walk you through some basic settings. Two-step verification, I recommend using if you can. It will make your account much more secure. Again, there's this sort of privacy security trade-off, or convenience and security trade-off. Two-step verification is where, in order to log in, especially from a new device or browser, they're going to ask you not only for your password, but then they're going to send a code to, for example, a phone number that they have on file for you associated with your account, and make you type that code in as well for logging in. So the reason that makes it much more secure is that if someone happens to get a hold of your password, they still can't log into your account unless they've also gotten that phone. It is a little bit inconvenient because it adds another step to the login process, but I recommend it if you can stand it because it really does help with account security a lot. Again, I recommend you add a recovery phone number and email address if you can. Even if you didn't do that when you first set up your account, you can add it in here in the security section, and that will help you get your account back if you lose your password. And while you're in here in security, just make sure your password is secure and don't lose it. Again, Google's a little bit infamous for locking folks out of their accounts if they've forgotten their password. So try to make sure that you have it written down somewhere secure so that you don't lose it. So that is that. If folks have questions, I am doing one-on-one appointments for folks in the Blue Hill area. You can find my contact information all on the library's website, which is bhpl.net. I would be happy to sit down with anybody who wants help putting some of these ideas into practice. And I'm going to continue doing these workshops weekly, so hopefully I'll see you at a future one. Thanks for listening.